You look at present science as it's presently constituted, the answer is no, because they haven't tried. Physicists, our present culture of physics is very materialistic. It's all about what they consider matter to be, and they assume that nothing else makes any difference except for matter and the forces between matter. So you have material objects like electrons and protons, electrical forces, and they pretty much assume that that's their universe, the material part. But if you start looking at other things, you find out that you left out a whole lot of phenomena. And the only way you can justify our present science is by purposefully neglecting it. Just one kind of dramatic example. If you go back to the old research, the afterlife research that went on in the 20s and 30s, they did something called seances. You have a dark room, you have a medium, someone who's good at a physical medium, who's good at creating a special kind of energy called ectoplasm that can do strange things. It can cover spirits, supposedly, with this ectoplasm, and they become visible. It can create other objects as well. Modern science has kind of decided to reject all that. There have been a few cases where there was fraud, and it had to do it in a dark room after all, which is kind of suspicious and kind of hard to prove. And that kind of says, well, then let's give up on that. And that was kind of my attitude until I discovered that the reason it's done in a dark room is because ectoplasm is very light sensitive. But with modern technology, like infrared cameras, you don't need light. You can take a picture with an infrared camera running the entire time during the seance and see the ectoplasm. You can watch it cover the spirits. The spirits crawl up out of a pile of ectoplasm on the floor, take the form of a being. It's often a being that the people in the group, in the seance, know. That there's one well-known seance called the Home Circle, where the lady's sister shows up fairly regularly. Her name is Aunt Ag. I have a picture of her in my book. And she just comes up out of this pile of ectoplasm on the floor, takes form, and then begins walking around the room and shaking hands with the sitters and things like that. And I have wonderful quotes by some lady who had come for the first time, and she was scared to death. I'm going to be talking to the dead, or I'll be seeing the dead, and she was scared. And this sweet little old lady walks around and starts chatting with her and shaking her hand, and all of a sudden you realize that the beings we call dead are not dead. We can't see them. They're invisible to us. They're in a separate parallel dimension, if you like, from a different frequency. But if you give them a way to make that connection between their dimension and ours, and ectoplasm does that, then you can see them. And there's a huge amount of data about ectoplasm and what it does. It's a material that is half physical and half spiritual. And it appears that torsion, which is the subject of my second book, this mysterious energy that the Russians discovered 50 years ago, it looks like it's probably the glue that makes ectoplasm work. There's basic cells and tissue from the medium, and then there's this energy, this torsion energy, that's sort of sticking it all together, and that gives them this material. The physical part is what we photograph, take a picture, and we in the physical dimension can see the picture because it reflects. We can actually feel it. It gives a force to this substance. But what holds it together is probably torsion. Anyway, they cover themselves with it, the spirits do. And it's just one more example of one of the discoveries I've made in my research, that on the other side, in the astral dimension, where we go when we die, we have bodies. We don't have to have bodies. We have a lot of, in that dimension, our intentions have a lot more power than they do here. But most people show themselves in terms of this form that is the same pattern that they had in the physical. So when we die and cross over, we can often recognize Uncle Fred because he looks just the same, okay? So in a seance, we get to see these beings. They come right out, and then scientists 50 years ago did a lot of experiments with this substance. There was a Nobel Prize winner named Richer, who did enormous amounts of research on ectoplasm. They would capture it and analyze it chemically and things like that. I mean, the special spiritual energy, the torsion, wasn't there, but they could measure the cells and they could see that it was from the medium. So we know a lot about it. So that's just one of a great many different kinds of examples we have where science could demonstrate that the afterlife continues. Now, I just wrote a book, as we mentioned before, Science of the Soul, the Afterlife, and the Shift, which is about 700 plus pages. And I go through about 10 different ways where we have experimental evidence, or pretty strong evidence, that the afterlife is real, that our souls continue. And so that's just one example. And if we had hours, I would talk to you some more about it, but that's just one example.